Enjoy these mind-bending paradoxes, get a good night's sleep, and don't forget to subscribe and drop a like. Sweet dreams. The reality gap paradox. If reality depends on our perception, but each person perceives it differently, can we say that a single objective reality exists? Imagine two people looking at the same sunset. One sees a fiery red sky and feels awe, while the other perceives it as a dark omen, reminding them of something coming to an end. They are witnessing the same phenomenon, yet their experiences are completely different. Is this just a matter of subjective interpretation, or does it prove that reality itself is fragmented, existing in the gaps between individual perceptions? This paradox raises a fundamental question. If everything we know about the world is filtered through our consciousness, can we even talk about an objective reality? We like to believe that the world exists independently of us. A table remains a table even when no one is looking at it. Mountains, rivers, and trees exist regardless of human observation. But is that really true? In the 18th century, philosopher George Berkeley proposed a radical idea. The material world does not exist, and everything we perceive is merely a projection of our minds. Esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived, he argued. If no one is looking at a tree in the forest, does it even exist? Modern science, at first glance, seems to have disproved this notion. We know that objects have physical properties whether we observe them or not. But quantum mechanics unexpectedly brought this question back into relevance there. At the quantum level, particles behave as if their state is undefined until observed. Until the moment of measurement, they exist in all possible states simultaneously. But when we observe them, their state collapses into a single definite value. This suggests that the very act of observation influences reality. If this applies to subatomic particles, could it also apply to larger objects, perhaps even to the entire reality around us? Even without delving into quantum physics, psychology reveals similar patterns. But if reality is split between perceptions, can it be defined objectively at all? Some philosophers propose that objective reality is simply what we collectively agree upon. It is a form of consensus, a shared framework of rules and laws that keeps the world within a common logic. But what if that consensus shifts? Could reality itself change if our perception of it does? And so we return to the original question. If two people look at the same sunset and experience it differently, which of them is seeing the real sunset? Or is reality somewhere between their perceptions? Can there ever be a single, universal reality that exists independently of perception? Or are we destined to live in fragmented versions of the world that never fully align? And if that's the case, what does the word reality even mean? The eternal observer paradox. If every event in the universe is always being watched by an external entity, does the mere fact of observation alter the future, even if we are unaware of it? Imagine walking down a dark hallway, feeling an invisible presence behind you. You can't see it, hear it, or prove it's there, but something in you knows you're not alone. Your steps change, your breathing slows, your thoughts become scattered. Something unseen is influencing you. Now, imagine this effect applies not just to you, but to the entire universe. What if every action, every planetary motion, every quantum interaction is always under observation? Does the mere act of being watched shape reality itself? This is the essence of the eternal observer paradox. Physics has long established that observation can influence reality. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles behave as waves when unobserved but collapse into particles the moment they are measured, as if knowing they are being watched. If observation affects quantum behavior, what does this mean for reality as a whole? And now, imagine an entity that watches everything in the universe, without interference, just watching. Does its gaze alter the fundamental nature of existence? Philosophy presents the concept of the God observer, the idea that if an omniscient being knows everything that happens in the universe, then free will is an illusion. If something already knows what you will do next, isn't that choice already determined? Now, add the effect of observation. If knowledge of an event changes its course, does that mean reality itself shifts under the gaze of an all-seeing observer? Perhaps the universe exists precisely as it is because it is always being watched. But what if this observer is not a god, but something else entirely? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping reality. If that's true, then each of us is an observer influencing the world around us. You look at the stars, and they become part of your reality. You become aware of yourself, and that awareness shapes who you are. But if every person is an observer, then who watches the entire universe? If reality only exists when someone is looking at it, what happens when no one is watching? This question becomes even more unsettling when considering the simulation hypothesis. If our world is some kind of advanced computer program, then someone or something must have created and is monitoring it. Perhaps we are part of an experiment with an observer studying us, recording every move but never interfering. If that's the case, are our thoughts, emotions, and even our existence nothing more than data being analyzed? And if the observer is always watching, does that mean our reality is fixed? Or, on the contrary, is it changing precisely because it is under observation? Religions and ancient mythologies frequently describe an all-seeing eye, an entity that is always aware of what is happening. But if we take this idea beyond myth and into real existence, then the entire universe becomes a stage, playing out an eternal performance. The question then is not whether we have free will, but whether we can ever truly understand reality when we are always being watched. But there's another side to this paradox. What if the mere awareness of being observed alters behavior? People act differently when they know they're being recorded. A criminal who realizes they're being watched might abandon their crime. If the entire universe is under an ever-watchful gaze, could that be the reason why reality is structured the way it is? And if that observer were to suddenly look away, would the world change? Or would we simply never realize that something had shifted? This paradox forces us to rethink the nature of reality and the role of perception in shaping it. We like to believe that the universe exists independently of us. But if observation can change the state of matter on a quantum level, if the awareness of being watched alters human behavior, if the idea of an all-seeing observer appears in science, philosophy, and religion, then maybe the very existence of reality depends on the fact that it is always being watched. And if that observer ever turns away, what would happen to the world? The absolute evil paradox. If evil is necessary for good to exist, can pure evil exist without any trace of good? Imagine something so horrifying, so all-consuming and uncompromising that there is not a single trace of good within it. This is pure evil, absolute darkness without even the faintest glimmer of light. But can such a thing even exist? If evil is defined as the opposite of good, can it exist without this opposition? Or is every evil inevitably entangled with a fragment of good, making absolute evil impossible? This paradox raises a fundamental question. What is evil? And can it exist in its purest form? To understand the paradox of absolute evil, we must first define what we consider evil. Throughout history, humanity has debated the nature of good and evil. Some argue that evil is merely the absence of good, while others believe it has an independent existence. However, most perspectives agree on one thing. Evil and good exist in relation to each other. We call something evil because we have a concept of good. But if a world existed where only evil was present, with nothing to contrast it, how would we even recognize it as evil? Would it not simply become a neutral state, devoid of meaning, where neither good nor evil exists, only an empty void? This question is particularly intriguing from the perspective of moral philosophy. In religious and mythological traditions, evil is often depicted as a force opposing good. Lucifer in Christian theology, set in Egyptian mythology, and Loki in Norse myths all symbolize chaos, destruction, and betrayal. Yet even in these stories, evil is never completely isolated. Lucifer was once an angel. Loki is intelligent and cunning. And even the darkest villains in literature often have motivations that can be understood. If absolute evil existed, it could have no goals, no logic, no awareness of itself. After all, if it recognized itself as evil, that would imply an awareness of its opposite, meaning that even in the blackest void, there would be a spark of good. Philosophers have debated this for centuries. For example, Manichaeism portrays the universe as an eternal struggle between light and darkness, good and evil. According to this view, they cannot exist without each other. Good cannot be defined without the contrast of evil, and evil cannot manifest without something good to destroy. If absolute evil existed, it would have to annihilate all good, but in doing so, it would lose the ability to manifest as evil, because evil requires victims, conflicts, and suffering, all of which presuppose the existence of something outside of it. There is a similar concept in physics. Think of the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy always increases, but it cannot exist without structure. Destruction is only possible in a system where order exists. If evil is entropy, then absolute evil would mean the complete absence of structure, a void in which nothing exists to destroy. This leads to a strange conclusion. Absolute evil would be equivalent to non-existence, a state where nothing remains. But if nothing exists, then evil itself ceases to be. Can we imagine something truly infinitely cruel and merciless? History has witnessed horrifying dictators, serial killers, and catastrophic events that demonstrated extreme human brutality. Yet even in the darkest moments, there were glimpses of good, acts of compassion, attempts to save others, moments of kindness. If even among the most terrible catastrophes, people found traces of goodness, can we truly claim that absolute evil is possible? Another dimension of the paradox is this. If absolute evil did exist, how would we recognize it? We judge actions and phenomena through the lens of our values and emotions. Even when we say something is pure evil, we use a moral framework that implies the existence of choice and contrast. But absolute evil excludes any comparison. It cannot be understood because understanding requires reflection, and any form of reflection contains elements of order, structure, and logic, meaning it is not purely evil. So where is the boundary? Perhaps evil is not a separate force, but merely a spectrum of human experience. Perhaps evil is relative, dependent on context and perception. And if that is the case, then absolute evil is nothing more than a logical contradiction, because it cannot exist in a system where defining something requires its opposite. This means that there will always be at least a tiny amount of balance, even if it tilts toward horror and darkness. Thus, the paradox of absolute evil forces us to ask, can anything exist that completely excludes its opposite? Or are good and evil two sides of the same coin, inseparable from one another? If absolute evil is impossible, does that mean absolute good is also a myth? Can anything exist that does not contain contradictions within itself? Ultimately, this paradox forces us to recognize that the concepts of good and evil are far more complex than they appear. And perhaps absolute definitions simply do not exist. The mirror mind paradox. If we create a perfect artificial duplicate of a person that copies all their thoughts and behavior, does it remain the same individual, or does it become a separate entity? Imagine standing face to face with your exact replica. It speaks like you, thinks like you, remembers everything you do. It even looks at you with the same expression you would use to look at it. But if this copy is completely identical to you, are you still the one and only original? Or are you now both the same person? This is the mirror mind paradox, a philosophical dilemma that challenges the very nature of individuality and consciousness. Where is the boundary between a person and their perfect replica? To explore this, let's imagine a thought experiment. Scientists develop a technology capable of replicating human consciousness with absolute precision. In one experiment, they place a person in a special capsule, scanning every neuron, every thought, every memory. Then they upload this data into another body, identical in every way, whether biological or artificial. The duplicate emerges from the capsule, looks around with your eyes, and is absolutely convinced it is you. It remembers childhood, favorite books, life's most meaningful moments. But if this being's consciousness is identical to yours, does that mean there are now two of you? If so, which one is the real you, or are both? This paradox directly relates to the problem of personal identity. What makes a person themselves? The continuity of memory, the uniqueness of a physical body, or something intangible, like a soul or a quantum property of the mind? If a person is merely a collection of information and experiences, then a perfect copy is no different from the original. But if there's something that cannot be transferred in replication, then there must exist an inherent self that cannot be duplicated. Philosophers and scientists have debated this for centuries. One of the most famous thought experiments comes from Derek Parfit, who describes a scenario in which a person teleports to another planet. However, instead of physically traveling, the teleportation process works by destroying the body on Earth and creating an identical copy in the new location. The person on the other planet remembers everything from their past life, but is that really them, or just a replica? If the old body were not destroyed, would there now be two people who both believe they are the same individual? This paradox takes on new urgency in light of modern technology. Artificial intelligence, digital avatars, and consciousness uploading are no longer just science fiction concepts. They are being explored in real-world laboratories. If we develop a machine that can clone consciousness, what happens to the idea of self? If one version turns left while the other turns right, at what moment do they become different individuals? Or do they diverge the very instant one takes an action, the other does not? Another disturbing aspect of this paradox relates to self-awareness. If a copy is indistinguishable from the original, does it know that it is a copy? Could we ourselves be replications, simply unaware of our origin? And if such copies have been made throughout history, how many originals have ever truly existed? This leads to an unsettling thought. Perhaps our memories are merely uploaded data in an endless chain of replications, and none of us are the first version of ourselves. But there's another perspective to consider. Perhaps identity is not just a static collection of memories, but an evolving process. Even if a copy is created perfectly, it will inevitably change, accumulate new experiences, and become something different. That means even perfectly identical beings will start diverging over time. After just a day, two clones might have different preferences because their environments and microscopic variations would begin shaping a unique trajectory. And yet, the fundamental question remains. If one copy disappears while the other survives, does that mean death is no longer final? If consciousness can be transferred into a new body, do we lose something essential in the process? Or is each transfer the destruction of one identity and the creation of another, merely believing itself to be a continuation? The mirror mind paradox forces us to reconsider the concept of selfhood. We like to think of ourselves as unique, but perhaps that is merely an illusion created by consciousness. If cloning consciousness were possible, would it change the essence of what it means to be human? Or would it reveal that our individuality was never as distinct as we believed? The vanishing self paradox. If human consciousness is constantly evolving and updating, is a person still the same as they were yesterday, or does each morning bring a new individual? Imagine waking up every morning and turning on your phone. The screen lights up, apps reload, and everything seems to function just as it did the day before. But what if, during the night, the system completely reset, deleting old processes and rebuilding them from scratch? The phone remains the same, but its internal state has changed. Now, what if the same thing happens to you? Each morning, you wake up thinking you are the same person. But are you really? This is the essence of the vanishing self paradox. If identity is a collection of memories, thoughts, and experiences that constantly update, does a person remain the same? Let's look back at your past. Think of yourself as a child. Your interests, fears, and dreams were completely different. Maybe at 5 years old, you loved cotton candy, but at 25, you can't stand the thought of it. Perhaps you once dreamed of being an astronaut, but now you work in an office and only think about space when you see a headline. If your younger self met you today, would you even recognize each other? Or are you two completely different people, connected only by a thread of memories? This paradox is especially intriguing from a scientific perspective. Neuroscientists claim that the brain is a dynamic system, not a static structure. Our neural connections are constantly changing. Old memories fade or transform, creating the illusion of continuity. You may think you remember past events accurately, but in reality, each time you recall something, your brain reconstructs it, altering details along the way. In this sense, your self today is just a version assembled from fragments of yesterday. Now, imagine a more extreme scenario. Suppose scientists develop a technology that can perfectly copy and transfer consciousness into a new physical body. At night, you are scanned, and by morning, your consciousness is uploaded into a fresh, identical body. You wake up with all your memories, emotions, and thoughts intact. But if your original mind was destroyed in the process, are you still you? Or is this just a perfect replica, while the real you ceased to exist? Let's take it a step further. Suppose you are given the option to transfer your mind into a new body every 10 years to remain young forever. After several transfers, you realize that not a single atom of your original body remains. Every cell has been replaced. At what point did the real you disappear? Or did you never disappear at all, because identity is something beyond just physical matter? There's another dimension to this paradox: memory loss. Imagine someone suffers amnesia and forgets everything about their past. They lose their memories, their relationships, and even their sense of self. Are they still the same person? If identity is tied to memory, then without it, they are someone new. But if identity is something more than just memory, then what exactly makes us us? Philosophers have debated this for centuries. Existentialists argue that identity is not a fixed collection of memories, but an ongoing process. We don't simply exist, we are always becoming. If this is true, then the self is not a stable entity, but a flowing, ever-changing state. This leads to an even deeper question. If identity is constantly shifting, can we ever claim that a stable self exists at all? Or is it merely an illusion maintained by the brain? If consciousness is a book that we rewrite every day, does that mean the author remains the same, or is a new writer born each morning? Perhaps the most unsettling conclusion is that our sense of self is not as solid as we believe. Maybe we exist only in the present moment, and everything before it is just a collection of memories that are constantly being rewritten. If that's the case, then every new day isn't just a continuation of the previous one. It's the birth of a new version of ourselves who will wake up tomorrow and ask the same question: am I still me, or has someone else taken my place? Thank you for watching. Leave a comment about a paradox you've experienced in your life, and don't forget to check out our other videos. Hugs.